They escorted Elena Ward out of her own company, with a security guard who smelled like Doritos and regret. That was 5 weeks ago. But if we are being honest, and at this point, there's no reason not to be, the story didn't start there. It started 9 years earlier, with a broken microwave in a tiny studio apartment. Elena was reheating leftover pad thai at midnight, while debugging the first version of a sentiment analysis model. Her head throbbed with a migraine. Her laptop wheezed like it might give up before she did. The apartment walls were cracked, thin enough to let her hear neighbors screaming about unpaid bills and stolen vape cartridges. Luxury, back then, meant 2-ply toilet paper and coffee that wasn't instant. There was no company. No investors. No roadmap. Just Elena, a whiteboard balanced against the wall, and stubborn belief. 3 hours later, the model worked. She didn't realize it yet, but that accidental breakthrough would one day help a Fortune 100 company avoid $1 billion public relations disaster. In that moment, it only felt like a quiet miracle, like she'd briefly cheated gravity. She sat back, stared at the screen, and laughed to herself in disbelief. Within 18 months, the apartment transformed into an illegal fire hazard of laptops, cables, and people. Engineers slept on couches. The caffeine budget somehow exceeded the rent. Between sleepless nights, broken ramen packets, and one strange week when their back-end went viral because someone thought they were predicting the apocalypse, the outside world finally noticed. A mid-sized firm came calling. They promised funding, expansion, mentorship. They talked about honoring her vision and helping her scale what she'd built. They sounded sincere, professional, safe. Elena sold the company for $1. Not because she was naive, and not because she didn't know its value. The real deal was buried deep in the contract: equity, long-term influence, and a single clause that mattered more than everything else combined. If she were ever fired without cause, she could buy the company back. Same price. $1. Her lawyer, Caleb Rhodes, paused when he read it. "You think they'll forget?" he asked. Elena smiled. They won't even see it. And she was right. She stayed on as chief strategy officer, believing, at least for a while, that the company she built still belonged to her in spirit. At first, staying on after the sale didn't feel like a mistake. Elena Ward still had a title, chief strategy officer, and for a while, people still listened. The product team reported to her. Engineers came to her desk with real problems, not polished slides. The company still felt like something she recognized. Then Richard Cole arrived. The new CFO walked in with a square jaw, immaculate suits, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never having built anything with your own hands. He spoke fluently in acronyms and forecasts. Every sentence sounded like it had been approved by a business school committee. Not long after him came Miranda Hale, the self-appointed VP of Brand Alignment. She introduced herself by explaining that her role was to translate complex systems into emotionally safe narratives. The first thing she told Elena was that the word data felt a little aggressive for external messaging. Elena laughed, assuming it was a joke. It wasn't. The changes came quietly at first. Monthly innovation meetings were renamed brand syncs. Engineers stopped getting calendar invites. The product roadmap, once covered in messy annotations and hard trade-offs, was replaced with color-coded decks about tone, trust, and vibes. The R&D floor was repainted in soft pastel colors meant to encourage mindfulness. All it really did was give everyone headaches. The old whiteboards, covered in half-erased equations and late-night ideas, started disappearing one by one. Elena found herself in meetings where she spoke and no one responded. Richard would talk over her, layering buzzwords like market synergies and agile recalibration, until her point dissolved into noise. Miranda started introducing her to new hires as our founding spirit, which sounded flattering until Elena realized it meant symbol, not authority. Still, she stayed quiet. She watched dashboards get simplified until they said nothing. User feedback was no longer analyzed for problems, it was rewritten by tone optimization AI to sound upbeat and grateful. Accuracy became optional. Comfort was the new metric. One night, Nina Patel, the company's best data lead, cornered Elena in the parking garage. Her voice was low, cautious. "I'm getting offers," Nina said. "Real ones. Double my salary. What's going on upstairs?" Elena didn't lie. "I don't know," she said. "But I'm paying attention." And she was. At 2 a.m., alone in her apartment, Elena poured a drink and opened the original contract. She flipped past the pages no one ever read, arbitration clauses, IP disclaimers, until she found it. Section 14C. Still there. Still valid. She called Caleb Rhodes. "I think they are forgetting what they bought," she said. Caleb didn't ask questions. "Then start preparing," he replied. That was the night Elena stopped trying to fight the shift. She started documenting it. By the time the Q2 review rolled around, the company felt unfamiliar to Elena Ward in a way that went deeper than new paint or rebranded slide decks. The energy was gone. The quiet hum of late-night problem-solving had been replaced by scheduled enthusiasm and rehearsed optimism. The boardroom was freezing that morning, the kind of expensive cold that said the air conditioning never turned off because no one at the top had to think about costs. Elena sat at the long glass table, laptop open, fingers resting lightly on the trackpad, as she flipped through performance metrics she still cared about, even if no one else seemed to. She was halfway through explaining a dip in user retention when Richard Cole cut her off. "Let's pivot," he said smoothly, as if he'd practiced the word in the mirror. "Miranda has a deck that really captures where we are heading." Elena blinked. "We are discussing product retention across enterprise sectors." Why would, but the lights were already dimming. An assistant moved with the confidence of someone following orders she didn't question. At the front of the room, Miranda Hale stood and clicked her Bluetooth remote like she was stepping onto a stage. The title slide appeared, From Sentiment to Synergy, the next chapter. What followed felt unreal. The analytics dashboard Elena had built in her apartment, line by line, bug by bug, was gone. In its place was a carousel of gradients, emojis, and soft animations. A smiling cartoon mascot named Trusty waved from the corner of the screen, now wearing sunglasses. "We are shifting tone," Miranda said brightly. "No more data overwhelm. Customers want comfort. Simplicity. Friendly vibes." Elena laughed. It wasn't planned. It was one sharp, disbelieving sound that escaped before she could stop it. Richard's smile vanished. "You find this funny?" "No," Elena said. "I find it tragic." The room went silent. Miranda tilted her head, lips tightening into a brittle smile. "We appreciate your passion, Elena, but we can't cling to founder sentimentality forever. That era was charming. We're scaling now. Founder sentimentality." Elena repeated the words slowly, tasting how wrong they sounded. Across the table, Richard leaned back and addressed the board. "Frankly, we need to ask whether her role is still aligned with where we are going. Vision is valuable, but alignment is vital. And we've hit a friction point." No one said fired. No vote was taken. But everyone felt it. The suggestion hung in the air like ozone before a storm. Elena closed her laptop. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She already knew the outcome wasn't going to be decided in that room. That night, she drove home in silence. At 2:37 a.m., she sent one text to Caleb Rhodes. If they fire me, she wrote, we are triggering it. Caleb replied with a single word. Understood. The email arrived at 8:04 a.m. on a Tuesday. No subject line creativity. No warning. Just 3 words that always meant the same thing. Mandatory HR meeting. Elena Ward read it once, then again, already knowing how the next hour would unfold. She dressed carefully, not to impress, but to avoid giving them anything they could twist into a narrative. Navy blazer. Neutral blouse. Hair pulled back. Founder, not rebel. The HR conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and tension. Diane Foster from Human Resources sat stiffly at the table, hands folded over a printed document she clearly hadn't written. Beside her was Richard Cole, calm as ever, scrolling through his phone like this was a dentist appointment he wanted over with. Elena, Diane began, voice practiced and hollow, thank you for coming in on such short notice. Richard finally looked up. We'll keep this efficient. Efficient? Of course. Diane slid the paper across the table. After careful consideration, the leadership team has decided to eliminate your position effective immediately. This decision is part of a strategic restructuring. Elena nodded slowly. Restructuring requires redundancy. Who's replacing me? Richard's lips twitched. That's not how we are framing it. No, Elena agreed. It's how the law frames it. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Diane jumped in quickly. This isn't a performance issue. Your contributions are appreciated. You'll receive a standard severance package and cause. Elena asked calmly. There it was. The pause. Half a second too long. No, Diane said. This is a without cause termination. Elena felt something settle inside her, not anger, not sadness. Confirmation. She picked up the document, scanning it like she was reviewing a grocery receipt. You'll need to include that language explicitly, she said. Without cause. In writing. Richard scoffed. You're really going to nitpick this? Yes, Elena said, meeting his eyes. I am. Diane scribbled a note, hands slightly shaking. Also, Elena continued, I'll need immediate access to my employment agreement, all amendments, and confirmation that my equity vesting is up to date as of today. Richard leaned forward. You're done here. Don't make this difficult. Elena stood, smoothing her blazer. I'm not. You already did. A security guard appeared at the door, awkward and apologetic. He avoided her eyes as he escorted her through the open-plan office she once built from nothing. Heads turned. Whispers followed. At the elevator, Elena paused. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't broken. She was counting. Because at 8:17 a.m., the company had made a very expensive mistake. At 8:19 a.m., she forwarded the termination email to Caleb with one line attached, without cause. Confirmed. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. I'll draft the notice. The doors closed. Elena smiled for the first time all day. By noon, Caleb Rhodes had cleared his calendar. When your client texts without cause confirmed, lunch stops mattering. He reread Elena's employment agreement for the 3rd time that morning, even though he already knew it by heart. Clause 14.7. It wasn't flashy. No bold font. No dramatic heading. Just 4 dry paragraphs buried between non-compete language and arbitration boilerplate. The kind of section executives skimmed once and never thought about again. In the event the founder is terminated without cause, the founder retains the irrevocable right to repurchase the company for the original consideration, exercisable within 30 days of termination. Original consideration, $1. Caleb smiled thinly and began drafting. The notice was precise, polite, unemotional. It stated facts, cited dates, attached documentation, and concluded with a single sentence that mattered more than the rest combined. Ms. Elena Ward hereby exercises her contractual right to repurchase the company for $1. He sent it at 12:41 p.m. By 12:46, Richard Cole's assistant was calling. Caleb didn't answer. At 12:52, the general counsel called. Caleb forwarded them to voicemail. At 1:03, the CEO, Martin Vale, called personally. That one, Caleb picked up. "You can't be serious," Martin said without greeting. "This is clearly an oversight." "No," Caleb replied calmly. "It's a clause. You know what I mean." "I do," Caleb said. "And so did your legal team when they signed it." Silence stretched on the line. "We are in the middle of a merger," Martin said finally. "This would destabilize everything." Caleb leaned back in his chair. Then perhaps firing the founder without cause was destabilizing too. The call ended shortly after. Elena spent the afternoon at home, laptop open, tea going cold beside her. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She reviewed infrastructure access logs and internal documentation she still legally possessed. The company was bigger now, more complex, more fragile, but the core system still ran on her original architecture. By evening, news started leaking. A rushed all-hands meeting was scheduled. Rumors spread through Slack channels. The phrase hostile repurchase appeared in at least 3 panicked DMS. At 9:17 p.m., Elena received an email from Martin. "We'd like to discuss alternative arrangements." She didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to discuss. At 11:02 p.m., a press inquiry landed in her inbox, asking whether she could comment on reports that the company's ownership structure was under dispute. Elena closed her laptop and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights she once dreamed about from a cracked apartment wall. They hadn't just fired her. They'd handed her the keys. By morning, the situation had escalated from internal panic to external crisis. At 7:12 a.m., the merger partner froze negotiations. At 7:45, the company's stock dipped hard enough to trigger an automated volatility alert. By 8:30, the phrase license uncertainty was trending quietly among analysts who knew exactly what that meant. Elena watched it all unfold from her kitchen table. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked callers, executives who had never once spoken to her directly when she was still inside the building. She let every call go to voicemail. Power didn't require urgency anymore. It required patience. At 9 a.m., Caleb Rhodes called. "They are scrambling," he said. "Legal teams on both sides are tearing through the agreement. They are hoping for ambiguity." "There isn't any," Elena replied. "No," Caleb agreed. "There really isn't." The problem wasn't just ownership. It was control. The company's flagship analytics engine, the one underwriting the merger valuation, ran on a proprietary license Elena had personally authored years earlier. At the time, it made sense. She wanted flexibility. Protection. A way to ensure the technology couldn't be misused if leadership ever drifted too far from its purpose. The license granted operational rights to the company only while the founder remained actively employed or compensated under agreed terms. At 8:04 a.m. the previous day, that condition had ended. By 10:15 a.m., the acquiring firm's due diligence team flagged the issue. By 10:22, their lawyers demanded clarification. By 10:40, they suspended the deal. Inside the company's headquarters, chaos took shape in glass-walled rooms. Executives argued. Lawyers blamed one another. Someone suggested quietly offering Elena a consulting deal retroactively. That suggestion died fast. At noon, Elena finally replied to Martin's email with a single sentence. All communication should go through counsel. The response came back in less than a minute. We are prepared to offer reinstatement, revised compensation, and equity adjustments. Elena forwarded it to Caleb without comment. Caleb replied seconds later. They are bargaining with someone who already won. At 2:30 p.m., a second email arrived, this one from Miranda Hale. It wasn't legal. It wasn't strategic. It was personal. You didn't have to do this, Miranda wrote. We could have worked something out. Elena stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it. By late afternoon, financial news outlets picked up the story. Carefully worded headlines hinted at governance instability and founder disputes. Investors hate uncertainty more than bad numbers, and this was uncertainty wrapped in legal precision. At sunset, Elena closed her laptop. Tomorrow, the board would meet. Tomorrow, ownership would be formalized. Tomorrow, the company would be hers again. Not because she fought. The board meeting lasted exactly 11 minutes. There were no raised voices. No dramatic speeches. Just a quiet, procedural acknowledgement of reality. The clause was valid. The notice was timely. The consideration, $1, had already been wired, processed, and confirmed. At 9:18 a.m., ownership transferred back to Elena Ward. At 9:19, the merger was officially terminated. The fallout was immediate. The acquiring firm released a statement citing material governance risks. Analysts revised forecasts within the hour. By midday, the company's valuation had collapsed so quickly that business channels ran split screens, trying to explain how a multi-billion-dollar deal evaporated overnight. Inside the building, employees gathered in clusters, refreshing their inboxes. Some were angry. Some were scared. Most were confused. At 11 a.m., Elena walked back through the front doors. No security escort this time. She wore the same navy blazer. The same calm expression. But the building felt different now, not because it had changed, but because it remembered her. She called a company-wide meeting. I won't pretend this week hasn't been disruptive, she said, standing at the front of the room. It has. And that's on leadership, past and present. But here's what matters now, the technology still works. The customers still trust us. And the future is still ours to decide. She paused, letting that sink in. Effective immediately, the executive team is dissolved. Interim leadership will be announced today. No retaliation. No purges. We move forward clean. People exhaled. Some even smiled. By afternoon, Richard Cole and Miranda Hale were gone, quiet exits, no statements, no farewells. By evening, Elena was back in her old office, the one with the wide window and the desk she never fully unpacked. Caleb called as the sun dipped below the skyline. You did it, he said. No, Elena replied softly. They did. She opened a small frame on her desk. Inside was an old, faded receipt, original consideration, $1. She'd kept it all these years as a reminder, not of revenge, but of leverage. Power didn't come from shouting. Or posturing. Or titles. It came from reading the fine print. And remembering exactly what you were worth, even when everyone else forgot. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one. Elena turned off her desk lamp, smiled to herself, and went home. The story was over.